As the Civil War ended, thousands of veterans came to the state, some single, some with their young wives and families came west, often in covered wagons, with a plow, other farming tools, and seed.
Did you ever hear tell of sweet Betsy from Pike, who crossed the wide prairies with her lover Ike, with 2 yoke of cattle and 1 spotted hog, a tall Shanghai rooster and old yeller dog? Sing to-rely-o-rely-o-rely, sing to-rely-o-rely-o-rely.
One of the many important groups who came to Kansas was the Mennonites, and they brought with them a new variety of wheat which foreshadowed the golden wheat belt that would eventually stretch across Kansas. The pioneers were faced with many problems. There were grasshoppers, and there were Indians. The cavalry continually tried to chase the Indians from homesteads and from the newly laid tracks of the railroad. The Kansas Pacific and Santa Fe continued to push west, sometimes through massive herds of buffalo. The Indians depended upon the buffalo for their meat and for hide. But with the coming of the iron horse, they saw big numbers of the animals needlessly killed. As soon the white man learned that there was profit in buffalo hides, Dodge City became the center of the buffalo industry, and 75,000 of the animals were killed in one winter. And so by 1875, the huge herds were practically gone. Well, the Kansas Pacific reached the western border. This was the line which opened the gate for Texas cattle. Texans were persuaded to trail the herds north to the railroad for shipment to the east. Abilene became the first of the famous cow towns. New loading chutes and pens lined the tracks and waited for the Texas Longhorns. They came by way of the Chisholm Trail. You've heard of that one, Billy. Finally reaching the shipping yards of Abilene.
Oh, come along, boys, and listen to my tale. I'll tell you of my troubles on the old Chisholm Trail. Come-a-tie-I-U-P-U-P-A, U-P-A, come-a-tie-I-U-P-U-P-A. I woke up one morning on the old Chisholm Trail, a rope in my hand and a cow by the tail. Come-a-tie-I-U-P-U-P-A, U-P-A,
The new business brought money into the town, but not all the money ended up in the bank. A lot of it was spent in saloons and dance halls. Law and order soon didn't mean much, and in 1870 the town's chief of police was killed. Wild Bill Hickok was hired as the replacement. Then the cattle center shifted to Ellsworth. And shortly after, a branch of the Santa Fe was built to Wichita, and many cattle were trailed there. As the buffalo business died, the thriving cattle trade shifted from Wichita to Dodge. Dodge City, the cowboy capital. As in other cow towns, the saloons outnumbered other businesses. The Long Branch was a favorite spot of the rowdies when they weren't out making life miserable for the decent folks. Many famous lawmen earned their reputations at Dodge. There was Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson. Some gunslingers shot it out with the lawmen. Some ended up in Boot Hill. Dodge, the cowboy capital for 10 wild years. And then, barbed wire. Homesteaders along the trails violently opposed the drives of cattle. The final blow came in 1885, when a law was passed forbidding Texas cattle to be driven into Kansas. The 1880s were boom years for the state. Speculators were buying acres by the thousands. Towns were being planned and developed. In one year, mind you, 3,000 buildings were constructed in Topeka, including work on the present state capitol building, which was to be the scene of some of the most dramatic events in the history of Kansas. One occurred in 1879. Prohibition became law. Public sentiment influenced the Kansas legislature to adopt a resolution for a constitutional amendment prohibiting the sale of hard liquor. But liquor could be sold at drugstores for medicinal purposes. Saloon keepers opened drugstores for the increasing number of sickly Kansans. The liquor laws proved too weak to keep Kansas entirely dry. It wasn't dry enough for Carrie Nation. Armed with a hatchet, she started chopping her way through the saloons of Kansas. She traveled through the state, winning new followers and fame along the way. Prohibitionists continued to pressure the lawmakers until a new bone-dry law was signed in 1917 by Governor Arthur Capper. Women were playing an important role in forming the issues of the day. The Kansans didn't hesitate about placing women in public office. In fact, Mrs. Susanna Salter was elected mayor of Argonia in 1887. She was the first woman mayor in the United States. The women simply couldn't be counted out. And neither could the farmers. Agriculture was growing, and so were farm problems. And in 1890, the Populist Party was organized. In 93, the Populists locked out the Republicans while fighting for control of the State House of Representatives. But the Republicans stormed the stairway and smashed down the doors, and the Republicans won. The Wichita National Guard had been called out and camped on the state capitol grounds. Kansas had attracted national attention. The Chicago Tribune described the state this way: bleeding, cyclone-swept, grasshopper-devastated Kansas is a thing of the past. Now it's a proud, triumphant, glorious Kansas that produces the biggest crops, the most beautiful women, and some of the greatest cranks in the country. Comments like this prompted an Emporia newspaper editor to ask, "What's the matter with Kansas?" This editorial brought William Allen White national prominence in 1896. And then, 2 years later, the United States was at war with Spain.
Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah.
The 20th Kansas Regiment was sent to San Francisco under Colonel Frederick Funston. A few months after the war ended, guerrilla forces revolted against the occupation troops in Manila. Funston's Fighting 20th was sent to help crush the rebellion, and he led a maneuver that resulted in the capture of the rebel leader Aguinaldo. During his service, Funston was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor and was made a brigadier general in the regular army.
When Johnny comes marching home, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home.
Many people believed Funston would have been assigned the command of the American forces in the First World War if it hadn't been for his untimely death. General Pershing received the command when the United States entered the war in 1917. Thousands of young Kansans left their work, or whatever they were doing, to join up